In this particular unit, or in this particular video presentation, we're going to be discussing some of the issues that pertain to demand and supply. Now again, all of this is under the whole issue of understanding how consumers behave in an economy, how much consumers will demand of a good when price changes and other factors change, such as their income and their preferences, and then also how do suppliers react to changes in price and how they will respond in terms of changing the units that they would supply, or how they would increase the overall supply of their products when other factors such as technology changes, indirect taxes imposed by the state, and so forth. So in this particular unit, we're going to try to discuss some of these things in a summarized format. It's important, therefore, us to understand what is demand. Now, when you go to a shop and you purchase a commodity in that shop or in the grocery, what you're actually saying is that by utilizing your income, you're saying that you have a desire to have this particular good or service. So demand is the willingness of a customer to purchase a good or service at a particular price at a given period of time, with all the factors being held constant. And the term "with all of the factors being held constant" can be wrapped up in two Latin words, ceteris paribus, which means that all of the factors being held constant. Well, now why do we want to hold all of the factors constant? Well, there are many factors that affect your willingness to purchase a good or service. Your income as a consumer, your preference or your tastes for that particular product, the price of the substitute to the product in question, and the price of a complementary good to the product in question. But the thing is, all of these will affect your demand for the product. So what we do in this social science called economics is that we limit the factors that could affect demand, and we simply want to observe the phenomena of your willingness to consume a good or service in relation to the price of that product. But we shall relax that assumption of ceteris paribus, and we will see the impact of us relaxing that assumption at a later point in time. Okay? So we define demand, again, as the willingness of a consumer to purchase a good or service at a particular price at a given period of time, with every other factor being held constant. Now, if we observe a consumer, right, we observe how much they will demand of a product at a given price or at each particular price level over a period of time, we can construct what is known as a demand schedule, which is this table here. So in this demand schedule, what we have is the price of a product, in this case here, an ice lolly, and the quantity demanded of that product, okay, that you will demand as a consumer of that product at that relevant price. So what we are constructing here is the demand curve for an individual. We are observing, okay, how many units of that ice lolly that consumer is willing to purchase at a given price. So when the price is 50 cents, we realize that the consumer will be willing to purchase 20 units of that ice lolly. When it is $1, they will purchase 16, 150, 12. And if we jump to 250, the highest price, the consumer will purchase 4 units. What we observe, therefore, is that as the price increases from 50 cents to 250, the quantity demanded fell from 20 to 4. We can therefore make a statement that the relationship that exists between the price of a product and the quantity of a product is inversely related, meaning as the price was to increase, the quantity demanded decreased. But if the price were to decrease from 250 to 50 cents, as it decreases in price, the quantity demanded increases. So that's what we mean an inverse relationship. As one variable goes one way, price, the other variable goes the opposite direction. So as price increases, quantity demanded decreases, but if price were to decrease, quantity demanded would have increased. what is the demand curve? Well, what I usually tell students is that in economics, there are three possible ways that we can communicate or display information, or yes, communicate. And one is we could do so verbally, right? We can do so mathematically, and we could do so diagrammatically. Okay? And we realized that we discussed we defined demand earlier, and we were able to construct a demand schedule by observing a consumer's response in terms of the units they consume as the price changes. And now what we can do is create a diagram, plot the information that we receive from the demand schedule, and create a diagram. And that diagram that we will create will be known as our demand curve. So the demand curve illustrates, therefore via diagram, the willingness. So it illustrates on a diagram the willingness of a consumer to purchase a good or service at a given price over a given period of time, other factors held constant. So it's in its entirety, it's the same definition of demand, but what we are saying is that the demand curve illustrates that demand. So here we have our demand schedule again, and we have the demand schedule, the price of the lollies, and the quantity demanded. And then we're going to observe this column to the right, the furthest column to the right, where we have the quantity demanded when the income increases. And what we're doing here is that we are relaxing the ceteris paribus assumption. And we are saying that we're going to allow income to increase, and we're going to observe the phenomenon. Okay? So let's construct our demand curve. So on the y-axis here, we have our price of lolly. From 50 cents going straight up to $4, we have calibrated the y-axis. Our x-axis, we have the quantity demanded of ice lolly. Okay? Beautiful. Now, we can now plot the information here in our diagram. At 50 cents, 20 units was demanded by this consumer. At $1, 16 units were demanded. At $1.50, 12 units were demanded. At $2, 8 units were demanded. And at $2.50, 4 units were demanded. Okay? It will be possible therefore for us to connect all of these points. And when you connect all of these points, we have what we term our demand curve. So therefore, our demand curve is drawn by connecting all of these possible combination choices at each price level that we observe is made by the consumer. And hence, you have our demand curve. Now remember, this demand curve would have been drawn on the assumption that all other factors are held constant. Now let me ask you a question. If your income, your income alone was to change, it means, and your preference for the good remains the same, you love the good. If your income were to increase, you would actually desire, more of the product because your income has increased, right? Other factors will come into play, but we are simply assuming that you would desire more. And with an increase in income, it means at every price level, 50 cents, $1, $1.50, $2, and $2.50, you can actually have more of the product at every price level because overall your income has increased. Okay? So with an increase in income at every price level, you would be able to demand more because of that increase in income. So what we're saying here is that we observe of this particular consumer that with an increase in income, now we have no information about what is the extent to the increase, but that is not totally necessary. All we are simply assuming here is that income has increased. We have relaxed that assumption, and we are going to observe the impact on your demand curve. So income has increased. Demand therefore increased from 20 to 28 when price was 50 cents. It increased from 16 to 24 when price is $1. It increased from 12 to 20 when price is $1.50. It increased from 8 to 16 when price was $2. And it increased from 4 to 12 when price was $2.50. We therefore could construct or plot those points, what we are doing now, and in plotting those 2 points, or well, all of those points, what we now have is a demand curve further to the right, labeled as D1 or D superscript 1. How did this occur? Our demand curve moved from the left to the right. It was to the left, and we have a new demand curve that is further to the right. This simply occurred because the consumer was able to purchase more quantities at each price level because of their increase in income. Okay? So when the price of a good in question changes, it results in a movement along the demand curve. That means the quantity of the good that is demanded has changed. Your quantity demanded changes. But when there's a change in other factors, because what we saw happen with the shift in the demand curve, it would happen with all the other factors that affect demand apart from price. Okay? So let me explain. Look at this. We said before, when the price was 50 cents, 20 units was demanded. However, when the price moved from 50 cents to as high as 250, 4 units were demanded. Do you realize something? From 50 cents to 250, you remain on the same demand curve. On the same demand curve. All that changed was the units that you demanded. Alright? So from 50 cents to 250, you decreased your quantity from 20 units to 4. So when you basically remain on the same demand curve and you change the amount that you demand, it is referred to a change in quantity demanded. So I'll repeat this. From 50 cents to $1, demand changed from 20 to 60. From 1 to 150, from 16 to 12. From 150 to 250, from 12 to 8. And from $2 to 250, from 8 to 4. Each time price changed, all that took place was a reduction in the quantity demanded. So therefore, quantity demanded changes. If we look at a price reduction from $2.50 to $2, it's going to be from 4 to 8. $2 to 150 is going to be from 8 to 12, and so forth. Again, changes in price are met by a change, or they are met by a change in the quantity demanded. However, when income increased, the demand curve shifted to the right. So there are other factors that affect demand besides the income of a consumer. And what we can conclude is that your demand curve can shift when there is a change in the consumer's income. It can shift when there is a change in the consumer's preference for the product or their desire for the product. It can change, or it can shift when there is a decrease in the price of the complementary product or an increase, and it can change when there is a change in the price of the substitute product. Now, to be specific to our example, the shift to the right depicts that the consumer will demand more. What therefore could cause a consumer to demand more? Well, your income must increase. Not a decrease in income, but an increase in income. Your preference or your desire for the good must increase. A complementary good is a good that goes hand in hand, and therefore if the price of the good that goes in hand, so for instance, when we use film and camera, okay, if the price of film is a complementary product to cameras, and therefore if the price of film were to go up, the demand for cameras would go down. So therefore, if the price of the film were to go down, therefore the demand of the camera would go up. It's the same thing with printers and printer ink. These are complementary products. So therefore, for your demand curve to shift to the right, the price of the complementary product must decrease. And similarly, substitute products are those that you could defer to if the good is the good in question that you're demanding is not available. And therefore, a shift to the right in this demand curve depicts that you want more lollies, and therefore whatever substitute product there exists for lollies, the price of that product has to increase, which will cause you to increase your consumption of your demand curve. And ultimately, when there are shifts in the demand curve, it depicts a change in demand.